Hi, I'm Marla Niederer from OrsinisAngels, and for the month of May, I wanted to do something that had to do with mermaids. And I kind of thought, what if Frida Kahlo was a mermaid? So I used this as a reference photo to do a sketch. And it's, it's in the public domain. It is from Wikipedia that I found the photo. And then I just used graphite to do this sketch. And what I did was I also used just random images of seashells and sea flora, and then a skeleton of a deep sea fish to embellish my sketch. Now what I'd like to do and share with you today is how I'm going to take this sketch where I have things worked out already and transfer it to watercolor paper and use that for watercolor painting, which I will share with you step by step. If you like this kind of thing, let me know in the comments, and I could add more of these types of projects to my YouTube channel. So with much more ado, what I'm going to start out doing is just tracing. And I have some tracing paper, and that's how I'm going to transfer the image onto my watercolor paper. So what I might do is, just so that I am able to check and make sure I'm getting what I want, I'm not going to trace all of the shading. I'm just going to trace the basic lines and then transfer that, and then use the sketch itself as a reference for my painting while I'm working on it. So I think I'll just put a couple more pieces down and start working on tracing. So I'm just using a regular mechanical pencil, and I'm just going to trace the features. And not all of it, and I did, the reason why I'm doing this and I didn't do it on the watercolor paper is initially I didn't really know where I was going with this. I was just playing around and having fun. And the other thing is when you do a lot of graphite onto a piece of watercolor paper, you can damage the paper. So before you even started, it's harder to work with. So that's why I like to sketch. Sometimes I work directly onto the watercolor paper, but other times I like to work out my sketch before, and just to kind of protect the paper while I'm doing that. Okay, so after I trace the primary lines that I'm using, I think I'm going to add another one here for her chin. Okay, so I have a basic line drawing. You know, not a very detailed, it's more your basic lines that I'm going to be using for the painting. And what I do after, I'm just going to take the tape off. Now, if you're uncomfortable doing something like this, you know, drawing it yourself, I'm going to put the basic line drawing so that you can print it out onto my blog, and in the description of the video I will put a link to that. But the other thing you could do is if you find a public domain image that you are attracted to and you're not comfortable in your sketching skills, you could just trace, you know, print it out and trace that as long as it's in the public domain, because then you're free to use it. But what I'll do now is I will just trace it on the back side so that when I transfer it, it'll transfer right to the watercolor paper. Okay, so before I put it, you know, trace it onto my watercolor paper, I have just a piece of foam board. I've had this for a really long time, obviously you can tell. You know, you can use a new one, but I had this and it's the right size. And basically I'm using Arches paper, and it's the cold press, and it's the 140 pound, and I like Arches because it, you know, I tend to use a lot of layers with my watercolors, and it is very good for that kind of painting. You can lift watercolors from it. You can use a lot of different layers, and it actually I think I'm going to use this side, and it I probably need another board at some point, but you know, but anyway, so I just really like the paper a lot. I've been using it for a while. I've used other papers, and I just find that this one has worked the best for me, but use what you have, use what you like and prefer. And what I'm doing is I'm just, you know, taping this down to the board, and this is so that it will not buckle so much when I'm working on it, and you know, when I let it dry, it'll dry flat. I've painted on paper where I didn't do this, and it does tend to buckle more, so I try to avoid that by taping it down. Another alternative is a lot of different watercolor papers come in blocks, and you can paint right on the block because the pages are all attached, so it kind of gives it it does the same thing as if you were painting on a board, taped down on a board. So, and this is just artist tape from Dick Blick. Now you can do kind of the same thing I'm doing to transfer a sketch onto a canvas. I mean, you wouldn't have to tape it down. But the transferring process could be the same if you were transferring a picture onto a canvas. So I'm going to decide, where do I want this placed in the picture? I kind of want interest, so do I want it this way? I think I like it here, because I don't want to do it right in the center. I want to kind of have it off to the side a bit to give it a little interest. So what I'm going to do is tape it down so that I trace it and I'm not moving the paper all over, but I can still lift it so I can check and make sure that I'm tracing it correctly. Okay, so before I take the tracing paper off, I will check and see, and I do have a light line, and I like that. I don't want it really dark. It's enough for me to use the reference points. And so then what I'll do, the next step is gather my watercolor supplies, and I will be back. To start off, what I'm going to do is pick some of the watercolor colors that I'm going to be using. So I have a scrap piece of watercolor paper to start out with, and I'm using a ceramic palette that I purchased at Dick Blick, and also I have a series of round palettes that I also purchased there, and I'll be using those for mixing and for applying my watercolors. So to start out with, I have gathered several watercolors, and I have an assortment of Daniel Smith and Holbein and also Sennelier watercolors. So I think what I'm going to start out with is, I think I'm going to try an Amazonite Genuine, and that is Daniel Smith. I have a turquoise blue. I'm going with watercolors, you know, under the sea watercolors. And I will be using a Payne's Gray for darkening, so I know that so far. I'm also probably going to be using a phthalo blue, and this one is Sennelier. And then I might be using an ultramarine. I have a couple of colors in the purple tones, like I have a quinacridone purple, a wisteria, and these are both Daniel Smith. And I also have a moon glow, which I really like, and that's also a Daniel Smith. And then I may introduce other colors as I go along, but I want to start out with more in the blue tone. And I think, and then I also have a cerulean blue, and this is Winsor & Newton. And so I think what I'm going to start out with, I don't think I'm going to start using the purples or the Payne's Gray right away, but I probably will use them down the road. And I think I'm going to just try out the blues and the Amazonite. So I'm just going to put them on my palette just a little bit. And I like to write down what I put down so that I'll have it for later reference. So what I'll do is I'm going to add some water, and I just kind of spray my watercolors. You know, I just add a little water. And then sometimes I use a little wooden stick to mix, and depending on the watercolor. But this one's pretty thick, so I might mix that a little. And the Amazonite Genuine looked like it was kind of drying up in the tube, so I'm going to mix that a bit because it's really dry. And the other two are Sennelier. They tend to be very smooth, and I think a lot of that is because they use honey in them, so that kind of keeps them smooth and moist. Okay, so trying to have it so that you can see. I always, when I'm doing watercolors, I always have a piece of paper towel or a cloth to dab. And I think since I'm just kind of trying these out, I think I'm going to use just a larger brush. I think I really like these three, so I might focus on those three to start out with. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use the ultramarine, but I will leave that scrap of paper around so that I will have that as a reference. Okay, so now I have my watercolor paper, and I've chosen the colors that I'm going to be using. So I think what I'm going to start out with is working on the background. And for that process, I think before I do anything, I'm going to wet down the paper where I want the paint to go. And I have this old antique Grombacher bristle. And, but you know, use what you have. But I'm basically using a large soft brush for the water. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the light coming this way. So I'm going to start out with leaving part of it blank and just using color kind of this way. And I'm not really going to focus on the figure at this point. And I'm going to try some techniques. So I'll see if they work. And before I get too crazy with the painting, if I don't like them, I can start over. But so I'm just kind of leaving some white space to start out with, and then I'm going to go into, I don't know what I got on that brush, but I don't like it. And I think what I'm going to do while it's nice and wet, I'm going to start out with the phthalo blue. Now, I don't know if this will work really well, but what I'm going to do is throw a little bit of salt. And this is just plain old table salt. And I haven't added more than one color, just to see what this is going to do. And I have some plastic wrap that's press and seal. And I'm going to put it over it and kind of play with it a little bit. And I'm going to let that sit overnight, and I will be back. Okay, I let the painting dry, and off camera I added a few more colors that I might be using in the painting. And I just did little color swatches of quinacridone gold, and that's Daniel Smith, Daniel Smith Wisteria, Daniel Smith Purple, quinacridone purple, Daniel Smith Moon Glow, Sennelier Blue Indigo, and Daniel Smith's Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to set that aside and use that as a reference. So here is the painting, and I already took off screen the plastic wrap. I didn't have a lot of patience, so I didn't leave the plastic wrap on overnight. I left it on for quite a few hours, and then I peeled it off. It was still a little wet, so I let the salt sit overnight. And what I did to get the salt off is just rub it gently with my finger and make sure that all of the salt is off of the painting before I go further, because I don't want to embed it into my paintbrushes and ruin them. So I do like the effect, and I'm going to keep going with this and adding other colors. Since I want the light to be coming through here, what I'm going to do is work on this part of the figure to make it a little darker, and then kind of keep going. I'm going to wet it first before I do anything. So like before I add any color, I think I'm going to do the fish separately. So I have to decide what colors I want to go with. So I'm thinking I'm going to start out with Moon Glow to start out. So I did wet off camera my palette, and I'm just going to go with a light start of it. As this is, in essence, this is a pretty experimental piece for me, and you really don't learn a lot without experimenting. I mean, I like to try different things, and you know, some things will work, some things won't, and that's okay. So, and as you notice, I'm not really doing real skin tone. I'm kind of doing mermaid skin tone. You know, this is, you know, you're not going to see these colors probably on a real person, and that's okay, because I don't really want it to be. And I really liked that effect. I don't think I have enough color for the salt to really do much. So I think I might just add a little bit of the plastic wrap and just let that sit for a few, and just kind of continue to work on other parts of the picture. So, well, I really did like how it kind of wrinkled up. So I'm going to do a little bit of that wrinkling up on it. I might go in with the phthalo blue a little bit. And I'm going in with a smaller brush. I think I'm going to do some of the shadows, like in her headdress. I am going to add a touch of salt. I don't think it's real dark enough to make a lot of difference, but I'm just going to add a little bit. And I think I will add a little plastic wrap. and let it dry and come back to it later and see where we are.